Hello, everyone. I think we're live. Hey,
Hello,
Lono.
everyone.
There we go. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from Mason Works Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone. Today with my new friend, Lono Ho'ala. Is that right? Did I say it right?
That's right. You got it.
Slow. I did it slow. I have to say that's the scariest part about being in my seat is mispronouncing people's names. The rest of it's all fun, I have to say. So anyway, so Lono, I was introduced to you by Sean out of the Ions group because he is part of the Ions Maui group and Ions Hawaii group, and he is a huge fan of yours. And then you and I got to speak, and I can see why Sean is a big fan of yours. So Lono, could you explain to everybody a little bit about your journey to taking this position as a priest of a indigenous culture from the origin of the earth?
It's a good question. A shorter way of putting it is, how did a Colorado cowboy get to be a Hawaiian kahuna? I'd be happy to share.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I was born and raised in a little mountain town called Salida, Colorado. And when I was a little boy, I knew I was born to be a priest. And I talked about it all the time. My family was Catholic, so that made them think that I was supposed to be a Catholic priest. And when I was 13 years old, they sent me away to a Benedictine monastery. And I spent the next 4 years in a Benedictine monastery. And one of the things about me that's always been a part of me is the need to know what's real about things. I just need to know what's real. So when I went to the Abbey, it was called the Holy Cross Abbey. That was the Benedictine monastery. I spent every moment that I could researching the origin and development of the Catholic Church, because I needed to know if I was going to give my life to this church, that it would be something that I would not regret. And what I found out led me to have to leave the Catholic Church. And not only did I leave the Catholic Church, but I also left Christianity, because I also studied the origin and development of Christianity and many world religions. And my problem was not with Jesus. My problem was with much of what Christian churches teach have nothing to do with what Jesus really taught when he was here. So I needed to move on. And to make this a much shorter story, my wife and I wound up moving on to a little farm in a place called Penrose, Colorado. You're in Denver, you may know where Penrose is, but it's just to the south of Colorado Springs and to the east of Canyon City. And we had a little farm there, and I was raising Labrador Retriever puppies just as a hobby. I love dogs. I've always had Labrador Retrievers and German Shorthair Pointers, but I like the Labs better. Yeah. Anyway, I was sitting in my kitchen one day and I smelled this really terrible odor. And I didn't know if it was coming from in the kitchen. We'd had a problem where some mice had gotten into our insulation on our stove. And then when my wife turned on the oven, it kind of cooked the baby mice, and that had a pretty rough smell. So it was, I didn't know what it was. And when I went outside and I could see that there was access to the crawl space. I'd just bought the place. I'd never really been under there, didn't know much about it. But I pulled away the access and I could see the bloated carcass of this puppy that we had lost it. We thought maybe it was a coyote or an owl took it or something like that. but it had gotten under that crawl space, and there was a sump pump in the crawl space that had failed. And so there was about 18 inches of water in the crawl space, and this little puppy got in there and drowned, and it was now really nasty. So I knew I had to crawl under there and get it out. I couldn't leave it there. I called a neighbor. His name was Carl from, he lived a half a mile up the road, and he came down to help me. And the fellow who had built the house had rewired it. He was an electrician, and it was an old farmhouse built probably in the 1940s or something. It still had the old wires that were individual, that ran to fuses that you had to screw in and out. Well, he had changed all that into modern Romex and circuit breakers. And when he did, he labeled the breaker box, but he made a mistake. He labeled the oven the hot water heater, and he labeled the hot water heater the oven. Those were the two 220 volt breakers on the system. So when I decided I was going to crawl under there, this Carl said, I just turn off the main breaker because we don't want any electricity. And I said, well, I can't really do that because my wife just started bread in the oven and I don't want to ruin her bread. So I'll turn off all of the circuit breakers except for the oven.
Right.
And that's what I did. And you can see the rest of the story coming. What I had really done is turned off the oven and turned on the hot water heater, which was an electric hot water heater sitting in that water. So when I crawled into that crawl space, I was juiced pretty badly. And I was killed. I was out of my body, and I had a profound experience. I'm not sure here is the place to talk about that experience. I've done it so often for IANs and in other places. And if people want to know what I really experienced, then they can go to my website at HunaWisdom.com, and there's a complete story of what happened to me there. The most significant thing why I'm bringing it up, though, is once I wound up home, two remarkable things. Number one is I came to understand at an absolutely profound level who we are and what this life is all about. And then when I was in this place I call home, because what I realized once you're there, that's home. That's what's real. This is all a dream. Where we're at right here, right now, this conversation we're having is a dream. And it just was so clear that that was true to me from that place. We contain time. We're made out of God. The only definition for the word God that can possibly make any sense is that God is all that is. We are made out of God. Every part of our life is made out of God. And because God contains time, that's one of the big problems the religions have, is they keep speaking of God as being contained by time. You know, we got to do this, we got to do that. God is going to consign us to hell for time and all eternity and all that kind of stuff, as if God is contained by time. Well, if God's contained by time, then God isn't all it is. Time is all it is.
Right.
So time would be God, right?
Right.
God contains all that is. We are made out of God, so do we. And so that's another discussion we can get into about past lives and what that really means and all that stuff. But we come here for a reason. And again, I don't want to get into all of that. I want to keep on track with what I learned there. So I wound up getting a lot of information, and I was aware that I was getting a lot of very, very, very important information. The other problem was, however, is that I knew I wasn't going to be able to remember what I was getting in spite of the fact that it was so important. And so what I resolved I would do, I knew I was coming back. Somehow that awareness was there. I had a job to do here. I'm going to have to come back. but I know I'm not going to remember this information.
Wow.
So the best thing I could do was make an absolute conscious choice to remember that if I couldn't remember what it was, I wanted to remember that I had had the experience. And that's exactly what I did when I came back into my body. I was holding on to that awareness. I found myself really frustrated that just as I thought I was not going to be able to remember the details, but I was going to remember that I had that experience. So later on, about 2 years later, the electrical accident did a huge amount of damage to my body. It broke my back in several places. I had to have my hips replaced. My shoulders were broken. My brain was damaged. I started having grand mal seizures and my heart was fried. So the left side of my heart no longer talks to the right side of my heart. I was carrying a box of books up into an office building where we lived in Bountiful, Utah. At that point, we had moved, and I was carrying a box of books up the steps and collapsed and woke up in a cardiac care unit several days later because my heart stopped because the signals weren't working, and it went into fibrillation, and then all of a sudden I'm out. Same exact experience. Go into the spirit world. I realize that I'm having this information downloaded. I know I'm not going to remember it when I come back. And the whole thing is really frustrating and liberating and incredible all at the same time. So some time later, I've done very well in the financial world. You have to understand that I went through college in a medical program. I decided I was going to be a doctor. Once I got into that, I realized I couldn't practice as a doctor in good faith because as a biochemist, which was all of my advanced studies, what I was being asked to do as a doctor, I couldn't do, like prescribe statin drugs to somebody with high cholesterol. If you do that, you're going to cause people to have congestive heart failure. And I know that, and other biochemists know that, but unfortunately, doctors aren't trained to that in medical school. And so they put out prescriptions that, it's a business controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. And if you're an ethical person and you come to know certain things, it's very hard to operate in that kind of an environment. And I know a lot of wonderful doctors, by the way, and I think these people are often and mostly really dedicated to the best interests of their patients, but they can't operate the way they would prefer to operate. And that's changing to some degree. There are doctors out there now that are not afraid to talk to people about alternative methods of healing. And that's wonderful. But it was, you have to understand, I'm 73 years old and I was going through this when I'm in my 20s. Right. And it was a different world back then. 50 years ago, it was quite a different world.
Right.
So I couldn't practice medicine. I needed to make a living. So I got involved in business. I eventually got a real estate broker's license, an insurance broker's license, a stockbroker's license. And I wound up working for E.F. Hutton. I was in E.F. Hutton's top 10 producers in the country. And eventually I wound up being hired as a chief economist and due diligence officer for a securities firm. Tremendous amount of economic background. I started a radio program called Money Talk that was eventually taken over by a guy named Bruce Williams, but that was broadcast out of Salt Lake City. It was across the country. I interviewed a lot of politicians, big shots, those kinds of people. And it was interesting that I had all of that experience on top of the medical experience, on top of all this stuff to do with religion in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So I'm living in Aspen. I own a guest ranch in Utah called the Red Canyon Resort. I'm in the process of developing that. I'm thinking that I've reached the pinnacle of my life. I'm extremely happy. You know, I Colorado cowboy. I love fly fishing. I love hunting. And my wife and I did this TV program broadcast out of Aspen called Rocky Mountain Lifestyles. And we were asked to go interview this lady who was reputed to be a psychic. You got to understand, I'm a scientist, so being psychic, I'm already skeptical.
Yeah.
But I'm going to listen. And we got to her house. She was a delightful lady. We decided to have her on a program, but she had a husband who was a jerk. He was a Hawaiian guy. He claimed that he was a grandmaster of the Hawaiian martial art form of Lua. And he was going on and on. It was very difficult even to talk to her because he kept wanting to interject. He wanted to take us in and show us his Hall of Martial Arts Hall of Fame picture and all that stuff. And when we finally got done interviewing her, we told her we'd have her on the program. He wanted to be on the program because he said he had made this video and wanted to promote it, how women can protect themselves against date rape using the principles of Lua, which was this system he says he's the grand master of. And he asked me what I thought, and I excuse my language, but this is what I said, and it's relevant. I said, you know what I really think? I think you're as full of shit as a Christmas goose. And you know, this is a guy who's not used to being talked to that way.
Oh my
But
God.
something else you need to understand is about 2 weeks before, my wife was in the grocery store in Aspen, and the same guy walked up to her and tried to put the make on her. And she told me all about it when she got home that day. And when we got to the door, yeah, and this guy comes to the door, she said, that's the guy I was telling you about. So I didn't like him to begin with, obviously. And here's a married man with 2 kids, and you know, just it was just a difficult thing. So instead of getting mad at me, what he does is he starts laughing, and he said, you're the guy I've been expecting. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I am in some trouble, and I have a shaman who is from the Taos Pueblo, and he said that the person I would meet, I was going to meet a person who would tell me, who would be able to help me. And how I would recognize him is he would tell me I'm as full of shit as a Christmas goose. So you're the guy.
Wow.
What do you think? And I said, I still think you're as full of shit as a Christmas goose. So he said, I got to talk to you. What do you charge? And in those days, I quoted him a price twice as high.
You didn't want to help him.
I didn't want to help him, and I didn't want to do anything. I was surprised he went back to his bedroom, came out with 3 $100 bills, put them in my hand, and said, let's have lunch tomorrow. So we did. And to make a long story short, he said that this guy said that this shaman said we had to work fast because I would be leaving soon to go to Hawaii to complete my priesthood training. I don't know this guy from Adam. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know my history. At that point, I'd kind of given up on the idea of being a priest because I'd done all this other work.
Right.
And I just thought, well, maybe that was something that was in my mind as a kid. I didn't know, but I was always totally fascinated. I was still a passionate student of the Dead Sea Scrolls, everything to do with the origin and development of Christianity. But he didn't know any of that.
Oh, no.
So anyway, again, to make a long story much shorter, in 60 days, I'm sitting in Hawaii wondering what the hell happened. My guest ranch is history. And we're sitting there, what am I doing here? And so we got this house. It was right on Alii Drive on the big island of Hawaii, right on the ocean, and right across from the Keauhou Beach Hotel. And I would sit out at night. I just because I was so perplexed about what had happened in my life. I mean, everything had just gone upside down in a way that was so improbable that you what is going on? You know, it just blows your mind. You don't, yeah. So I'm sitting out there on the lanai at night, and the moon is over the ocean. And all of a sudden, this information that I got from those death experiences started coming through.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, I knew what Hawaiian words meant. I knew an alternative version of what most people thought Hawaiian history was. I became aware of all kinds of ideas and philosophies and thoughts that were not talked about original Hawaiian history. And my wife was so blown away by what I was saying that she ran to a Walgreens store and got a little handheld tape recorder and would hold it there and as I would talk. Now here's a guy who didn't believe in channeling, and what am I doing? Is I'm basically channeling, I guess, is what you would call it. It was, to me, it was like remembering. It was just there, and I knew, and I started talking about it, and afterwards I was just blown away by what I was saying. So she shared some of that with some of the friends that she met when we first made it to Hawaii, and they were interested and they wanted to come over for dinner and listen. And then pretty soon, one couple turns into 3 or 4 couples, which turn into 8 or 10 couples. And every Tuesday night, this impromptu group that came alive started meeting at my house. And I used to laugh. I called it another episode of As the Lava Flows, because it was just a hoot. So the difficulty was that, you know, now we're getting 30 people at wanting to come to the house on Tuesday night for this potluck and thing, and there's no parking. If you've ever been to Hawaii on Alii Drive, the houses are such that there's no, you've got to park on the street, and that half your car is in the street, and you know, when you got 10 or 15 or 20 people all wanting to come to your house of a night, that's a problem. So we needed to find another place. We started looking around, and we wound up getting led to this place up the mountain. In Hawaii, we would say up Mauka, up the mountain. And when we got there, again, big, long, magical story, but the end result is that this place that we eventually get has this big stone archway going over the driveway. And in the top was this symbol, a Chinese symbol. And the place had been built to be a Zen Buddhist retreat center. And it was absolutely fabulous and perfect for our purposes. But I didn't think anybody had wind up coming to a meeting up there because it was so far up off the road, and a rough road that went through macadamia nut plantations and papaya and coffee trees. And, you know, it was a spectacular drive, but rough. And I didn't have any trouble. I mean, people started coming up there even more than what were down at our house. But a big gate with this symbol, and I didn't know what that symbol had anything to do with, but it was called Lair of the Dragon. That's what that symbol meant.
Oh, okay.
I didn't think much about it. We started having these meetings, and one day, this fellow named Kahana and his wife Pahia show up, and they're old world Hawaiians. We had a friend who was a contractor, and how this came to be is this friend was building a house. He wanted to get a house blessing. He was looking for a kahuna, and he happened to find, he was on Kauai, and he happened to find this fellow named Kahana, asked him if he would bless the home for him. Kahana said yes, but he had no money. These people over there are very poor. They're not like we are here. And a lot of the Native Americans I deal with the same way. They're just, it's an entirely different lifestyle that money doesn't, is a big limitation. So he said, have you ever heard of this white guy teaching Huna on the Big Island? And Don said, yeah, he's a good friend of ours. We go up there every Tuesday night. Now, how this guy heard about me in Kauai, I don't know. But he said that he had heard about this guy teaching Huna and he wanted to be able to meet him. So Don said, fine, I'll bring you over, you and your wife, and we'll take you up to the meeting. So they did. And so that night, here's Kahana and his wife, Bahia. And when I'm introduced to him, he announces that his name is Kahana, and he's a kahuna of the order of Kane, which means a high priest, of the Mo'o clan. And the Mo'o clan is almost mythological or legendary in Hawaii. They're related to the Menehune, and sometime I can talk about where that whole story came from. But the Mo'o is a word that at the surface means lizard, like the little geckos that run all over your yard. But at the deepest level, it's dragon. And the Mo'o priests are the dragon priests. And why the dragon is because the dragon is the guardian of the threshold to enlightenment. That's the philosophy. It's the same as in China. There's this multi-headed dragon that's guarding the threshold to enlightenment. And the four heads, the mother is called worthy, unworthy. She has a daughter, good, bad, another daughter called right, wrong, and another daughter called fair and unfair. And it's a very, very intimidating, incredible beast that is the guardian of the threshold. And you need to be able to pass by this dragon to go into this place called enlightenment. And the Mo'o priests are the dragon priests. They're the people who have the ability to train people how to go past the dragon and go into that area. Now, he's coming up to our place, and the Mo'o are very secretive. And the reason that they are is because they had created the most conscious culture the world has ever known on Hawaii. And they were there for a long time before anthropologists ever just knew that this earlier culture existed. Their ancestors came to Hawaii about 750 BC, they say, and were there till about 1250 AD, when they were wiped out in a gruesome genocide mounted on them by people who came from Tahiti and Samoa, known as the Alii. And if you've ever been to Hawaii, you'll hear Alii all the time. The Alii are the royalty. They came originally from Tahiti. And when they came to Hawaii, they saw this culture there. There were no kings. There was no armies. There was no war. There was hardly any crime. And it was an incredibly enlightened culture. For 2,000 years, they lived in this place of enlightenment. And what happened was that Pa'au was amazed at what they had accomplished there. He was the king from Tahiti. He believed that it was his ancestors that came here from the stars. Now, all of the Hawaiians say their ancestors came from the stars. But for the Mo'o, these original people, that could mean it's a metaphor that they came here from the spirit world, or it could physically mean that somehow they came from the stars. None of that's material. What's important is that the Alii believed it was their ancestors, and everybody else who they found on the earth were to be their slaves. And this is something that is an old story that goes on over and over and over, where the king thinks that he's the guy who's favored by God and he has all the rights, and anybody else is dog poo and just supposed to do whatever he says. And that was Pa'au. So he came back with thousands and thousands of Tahitian and Samoan warriors. The people on the outer island said they knew what was coming, because when they woke up in the morning, the ocean had turned blood red with the reflection of the sunlight off the war capes. There were so many of these warriors in these boats. And when they hit the big island of Hawaii, they killed every kahuna of the order of Kane of the Mohu clan that they could find, along with every member of their family, in gruesome public executions. And then they wound up telling the rest of the people, there were two lower orders of priesthood in the general population. The lower orders of priesthood were too important to the culture. They're the boat builders, the doctors, all that kind of stuff. And he didn't want to kill all of those. So he said, if you will agree to become a part of my court, then you can be Alii and we'll adopt you into our situation. Otherwise, we will kill you and every member of your family, which they had just witnessed happen to all the high priests.
Wow.
So they fell into line. Some of them didn't. Some of them refused to be go along with the elitei way, and they were killed. Some people survived. Some people survived on the big island of Hawaii up in the mountains. Some people survived on Molokai, and some people survived on Kauai. And so that the Mo'o went underground, and to this day, if you are Mo'o, the elitei are pledged to kill you if they can find you. And that's why I'm in Colorado and not in Hawaii right now. So he makes this announcement in front of all these people, and I'm blown away. I can't, why, if this guy's truly who he says he is, that's like standing on a pedestal with a whole bunch of guns pointing at you and announcing, go ahead and shoot me. You know, it just didn't, it was surprising to me that he would do that. So after the potluck, we went into a room to have our meeting, and I decided to do a Nalu meditation, which I knew only a kahuna of the order of Kane of the Mo'o clan would know how to do. Don't ask me how I knew. It's just it came from this place.
Yeah.
So he didn't come into the room. He stood up in the hallway, big round room that was gorgeous, but he stood up where he was above everybody, and he was just leaning on the wall watching. And if you go to my website, you can see we actually have a video of him and I teaching together. It's pretty interesting. And he is watching me, the jet black eyes, you know, just an intense person. If you were there that night, you'd have chicken skin the whole night. That was just the way that it was. So he's watching me, and we go through the Nalu meditation, and at one point then the people repeat what the experience was that they had during their meditation, and then the person conducting it helps them interpret it. And that's what I did, and he's watching me. And so in a kind of a smart ass way, I said, now this man says he's a kahuna of the order of Kane, and so I'd like to invite him up to do the next one, because I figured if he was there just to cause trouble, that would do it and we could get it over with. I was, you know, everybody was wondering what's going on here. Why is he here? So he gets up to the front of the room, and he's absolutely perfect. He does the interpretation absolutely perfect. And I realized this guy is for real. So I walk up to the front of the room and I said, this man truly is a kahuna of the order of Kane of the Mo'o clan. I want to let you know that I looked at him, that I'm very honored that you're here. I was almost a little apologetic because I'd kind of been a smartass in a way when I invited him up there. But it's like, whoa, this guy is for real. And so he's looking at me, and he starts having tears coming out of his eyes, and he rips open his shirt. And on his chest is this tattoo. And I don't know if you can see it, but up in our logo right there, right in the middle, is.
I could go, okay. I could maybe go to your site and pull it up if you want. Okay,
Yeah,
keep going,
sure.
keep going while I do this, okay?
Well, it's what it is a tattoo of two symbols. And these symbols are the old world and the new world. and they're never seen touching in Hawaii. And the reason they're never seen touching is because it represents a very sacred prophecy that goes back thousands of years. And what the Mo'o say, yeah, there you go.
So
If you
what
look
we're talking about is
above
the symbol.
HunaWisdom, yeah, that's it right there. That was tattooed on his chest. So those symbols are a prophecy. And what the story is when the motherland, Mu, was operating, there were two priesthoods, priests of the light world, priests of the dark world. In Huna, dark does not mean evil like it is in this culture. Dark is the mother's womb. It's the place that nurtures life into existence. So the priest of the light world and the priest of the dark world, if you look at it in that context and not ascribe evil to dark, you'll get it. And that there was a broken trust. And the priests of the light world said, we are no longer going to share our direction with you. And the priests of the dark world, the old world, said, we're no longer going to share our power with you. And when that trust was broken, the motherland was lost.
Oh, wow.
And there was a colony, two colonies of priests that held the full priesthood. One was to the east and one was to the west. The one that was to the east eventually became, I think, the Mayans and settled North and South America. The one to the west wound up migrating up the east coast of Africa, across India, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, I should say, India, then Southeast Asia, and then went to Hawaii. And that's how the Mo'o got there. That's who those people were. And then they set up there and they went to Hawaii because it's the farthest removed landmass of any place in the world that's habitable. And they wanted to keep this message that they call Ho'ala Huna. And what those words mean is that which brings an awareness to the secret or sacred knowledge of that which is real. That's what those words mean. So they create this incredibly conscious culture. And the elitei come and they destroy it after 2,000 years of living in the most beautiful paradisical culture you can imagine. But they had no need for warriors. They had never had a war. They didn't have any of that issue going on. So when the elitei came, there was no way to defend against them, basically. And that's how they wound up losing their culture. The prophecy was that there was going to come a time when a priest from the old world would meet his spiritual twin brother from the new world, and it would mark a healing. And the way the priest of the old world, he would be set aside to find his spiritual twin brother, and he would be marked with that tattoo. And he was, when he was 4 years old, he was set aside to be the person who would find his spiritual twin brother, and he was given that tattoo.
Wow.
And he was in his late 40s, early 50s at that point, and had been looking constantly. And that tattoo had marked him for a lot of pain, because it's like somebody walking around saying, I'm Jesus or something. The fact that that symbol was tattooed on his chest was very offensive to a lot of Hawaiians, particularly Alii, who know what that symbol means. So he had visited Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins wasn't the guy. He had visited Tad James. Tad James wasn't the guy. He'd been looking for these people who had been writing about Huna, talking about Huna, but none of them were the people that he was looking for. And then he heard about this white guy teaching Huna on the Big Island, above a place called Pu'uhonua Ohona now, which is where the prophet said he would find his brother teaching. And the way he would recognize him is his brother would be teaching they're Mohu secrets, which have never been written about before. And that is what I teach. Never been written about before. The thing I'm really grateful for, hold on a second. Here's a book. This was written, Tales from the Night Rainbow.
Okay.
And what this was that book, by the way, is very famous. If you go on Amazon right now, you can buy that book for $650.
Wow.
That was dictated to her family from a lady who was the oldest living Hawaiian. She was 115 years old. She was alive when King Kamehameha started his unification tour. That is well, let me just put it this way. Most Hawaiians, anthropologists, people who live in Hawaii, old world Hawaiians, don't even know that the Mohu ever existed. You said you talked to somebody who said that she'd never heard of it before. That's common. And they don't know that it existed, or if they do know, they think it's a legend or a myth or something like that. Well, that lady is my witness to what I was writing about. And so she talks about the Mohu, and her family was Mohu from Molokai. And Kahuna's, the Hawaiian guy, his family is Mohu from Kauai. But these people exist. They're out there and they keep a very, very, very low profile. So when he announced this, he said that he knew that I was the person that he had been looking for all his life. And when he came up that driveway and he saw that gate with that symbol that said Lair of the Dragon, that was part of the prophecy. He would find his brother teaching at a place that was marked with a symbol that meant Lair of the Dragon, for dragon priests. And I'm blown away. My scientific mind has just exploded. It was just very, very incredible to hear all of this. And so he said, I'll prove it to you. So he walks over, we have a whiteboard in the room, and he draws a circle and he talks about this is our altar. And he invited me to start. And so I start in the north and I talk about what that part of the altar means. And then he takes over and he talks about the east, and then I talk about the south, and then he talks about the west. It's like we're reading out of the same book, turning a page, and I start off and I read, and then he picks up, and then it was just absolutely, completely one in terms of what we're teaching, the language, everything is absolutely identical. And he said, this is how I know this is my spiritual twin brother. And the prophecy has been fulfilled. And then he goes on, and this is where your business group might want to be interested. Then he goes on and he said, this meeting is supposed to happen just before a time of great pain for our world. And it's going to be extremely painful because there's going to be a new Alii arise. And these new Alii are going to attempt to do to our entire world what the Alii had done to Hawaii and destroyed their culture. Now remember, the Mohu said that the only definition for the word God that can make any sense is that God is all that is. Every person is a part of God. Every person's in their entire life is made out of God, because there's nothing else out of which they can be made. The Alii, they're the ones with the divine privilege. Everybody else needs to serve them.
Right.
And that's an age-old story, Kathy, that's been around. America is absolutely exceptional for this reason. The people had constantly been living under kings. Right. Kings, the church promoted this, the divine right of kings. The king has all the rights. It was a top-down system of government. The king has the rights. The only rights the people at the bottom have are what the king decides they can have. And it was a horrible experience for most people for thousands of years. And along comes people, first we have the invention of the printing press, and then we have the ending of the Dark Ages with the Age of Enlightenment, which was started in France. And our founding fathers were not Christian, as the myth goes on out there. Most of them that mattered were deists. They were people who had bought into the French Enlightenment movement, which was exactly the same thing. There is a God, nature's God. Nature's God is the source of our rights because we come from nature. That's the way they would talk about it. And so as a result of that, they wanted to create a bottom-up system of government where the people had all the rights, and the only rights the government could have are those delegated by the people.
Right.
And that's why America is so incredible. The Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Truth is always self-evident. We don't need to believe truth. In Huna, we say, belief is necessary only for that which is not real. That which is real, once discovered, can be recognized, recognized, to re-know that which you already know but have forgotten. Truth can always be recognized. And when it's honored, it works reliably and flawlessly. That's a 40,000-year-old principle of wisdom in Huna.
Beautiful.
And it was one of the most beautiful statements of the scientific method I've ever heard as a scientist. So that belief stuff needs to get thrown away. Huna is about reality. What can we know for sure? What can I recognize? We don't want any beliefs. Beliefs get in the way of our ability to prosper and grow and have life. Beliefs are the essence of unconsciousness. When we are operating according to beliefs, we're not able to see reality.
Right.
And that's what Huna is all about. Huna, the secret or sacred knowledge of that which is real. And when you get real about spirituality, actually, it's more magical than, you know, a lot of people who get their beliefs going and all that stuff. They get into little corners and backwaters where you can't really see how magical reality really is. So we share this information, and he says that now my job is to get this message out in fulfillment of the prophecies that said once he would find his spiritual twin brother being of the light world would understand how to be able to send the message around the world as if on wings of a bird. And it would ultimately be what would take down these new Alii. And these new Alii, who are they? They are extremely wealthy people, that the uber rich, they're multi-billionaires. Right now, they own our news media, they own both political parties, they own, they make huge grants to our educational institutions so that they'll hire people that will go along with their agenda. They own many of the big international businesses, and your conscious business people are having to work in the environment that these people are creating. And I want you to know they are not our friends. They're very unconscious people who are extremely arrogant because they have these billions and billions of dollars, and they are out to make the world into their image. And their image of what you are is not going to be something that you're going to like. So sad as that is, it wasn't a hard prophecy to make. If you think about it, in human history, we keep going through these cycles over and over and over again, where people get prosperous and abundant, and then we get unconscious and we start not defending our rights, and we start being in a place where we don't want to do the doing that's required to keep ourselves going. And eventually we wind up with tyranny, and then we have to fight our way out of tyranny. And then we, in this cycle, I have a picture that depicts it well in one of my classes, but it's a cycle. And so you can say, well, where does this prophecy come from? Common sense and just looking at how human beings behave. That's where it comes from. And we now have a major thing going on in our world. I'm 73 years old. I never thought I would see an America where censorship is routine, where you have these tech giants that think they can stifle free speech, where we have these people who are in the back pocket of the Communist Chinese Party, who's been paying off our politicians and people in business over and over and over again. A lot of businesses are in really bad shape because of this whole pandemic thing. The whole pandemic thing is a part of it. It was designed on purpose to take down the economy of the United States, because the United States and that idea that we get our rights from God is something that the new Alii cannot allow to go forward. They cannot. That's what stands in their way. And that's why the vehemence against the United States and needing to make it bad and wrong, and all this cancel culture stuff. And, now they're injecting racism again with this critical race theory, which is totally racist. Black Lives Matter is racist. Just the statement is racist. I get the point, but that's not how it's used.
Right.
All lives matter.
Right.
And as kahuna, nobody can call us racist, because our whole thing is that everybody is divine. When I say aloha to you, that word aloha means the marriage of life and light, which is how we define God. Marriage, lo, light, ha, life. When I say aloha, I say to you, and it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man, a black, a brown, a white, you're a part of God. And I'm going to honor you as a fellow divine being. So let's see these people try to call us a racist. The bottom line is, these movements are designed for one thing and one thing only, and that's to take down the United States so it can be replaced with these uber rich people at the top of the pyramid. And that's why it's Marxism. They want to use Marxism in order to be in control of everything.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you. People are really enjoying what you're saying. And I want to, Jade Raider said, so wonderful to hear this shared mahalo, Lono, and Lisa Ward keeps putting stuff, and Kathy Botchman says, this is amazing. And Lisa has said, there are no coincidences. So I don't see a lot of questions here, but I have a question. I have a question of, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Well, that's the second part of the prophecy.
Okay, good. Do we have time? We don't have a lot of time is the only problem.
Okay, I'll go quick.
Okay, or you have to come back and we have to talk some more for sure. But anyway.
Sure. The basic second part of it is the message. The message that is taking flight around the world as if on wings of a bird. That's the solution. How do we fix this problem? And that's the message. And that's why I've started the Eagle's Nest family. It's not my family, it's our family. For all these people that are out there, we all have these incredible gifts. And when we get the message and we see how the ancient Mohu, these are people that lived hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years ago that are sending a message to us because they knew we were going to be in this place, and they're telling us how to fix it. And that's the message I carry. So if you go to www.HunaWisdom.com, you can join there. It'll take you to another site called Eagle's Nest Family. That's the family.
Yeah.
And but there's a series of really important courses called the Way of Wisdom, because we have to start at the bottom. You have to be, who is God? What is this life all about? Who are you? How are you made? And that's all a part of the message. And it'll blow you away. And the amount of power that you can unlock in your own life by just, that's the whole point of enlightenment. Enlightenment is the ability to transcend perspective, to see from higher and higher perspectives. And the sooner we get higher, we can see more choices, and these choices work. So that's why we call it EagleVision. We get above things and we can see the stuff that we couldn't see from a lower perspective. So that's the part of this that's so fascinating. And you get there and you get these perspectives, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I get it. I get it. I get it. And that's the only thing that's big enough to take down all of these multi-billionaires and trillionaires. The one thing that's big enough to do it is ideas. And these are the ideas that can do it. So please go to the website. We need all of the workers that we can get. And be aware, you will find yourself under attack. There are energies out there that do not want this information to come forward. I'll be doing a workshop on how to deal with being a square peg in a round hole. You know, everybody who's into this consciousness at that level find themselves kind of like a square peg in a round hole. And it can be difficult going through life when people don't understand you. And we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But
it seems like a lot of the people in the spiritual communities talk about there being two worlds, that the old world is still going, but there's a new world, which in metaphysics would be higher dimensional access world. And they're both going at the same time, and there's no judgment. Everyone's allowed to evolve, but some people aren't going to evolve right now. And so you have these two different, or multiple probably, but two that have been identified. And it's really how you live your life. If you live your life as a victim and in scarcity and fear versus in co-creating with the universe, where the co-creation is how you best serve all. And that's what you're teaching. So this dream.
Yeah, yes and no. What you just said is correct in a way, but we reframe it slightly in a way that makes it even more sense.
Okay.
Okay, so, but there's not time here to do that today.
No, go ahead. I mean, why not? I mean, it's okay if we go over a little. Do you want to?
All I can share with you to keep it brief for today's purpose. Once we understand how God is made, and then we can understand how we're made. And there's this place in us that the Hawaiians would call the ku, or unahapili. That's the modern psychology would call it the subconscious. And all of these aspects are out there in the world as well. So there are people of ku, cultures of ku, the dark world. The dark world, remember, dark is not evil. Dark is like the mother's womb. It's the place of power. The Hawaiians would look at this like a ship. So the sails would be like ku. It's the power. It's what unlocks the power to drive the boat through the water. It's the heart. Okay. The light world is the mind. It's like the rudder of the boat.
Mhm.
It's the thing that sets the direction. The world would be called, that would be called in a generic way, uhane, or the character that would be in the stories that talk about it would be Lono. That it's the mind, the conscious place. So we've got the subconscious and we've got the conscious. We've got the rudder and we've got the sails. Now, what's required is for the rudder and the sails to work under the direction of the captain. The captain is that place in us that's connected to all that is, that's
Our soul.
divine.
Our soul.
Yeah, and there's lots of words for that in this culture, but we're all pointing at the same thing.
Okay.
And the soul is a wonderful way to say it. And so the captain is the place that knows. And whenever we have the sails trying to run the boat, feelings, you show me a person who lets their feelings run their life, and I'll show you a very miserable, unproductive person. People who are in their mind, scientists, everything is about mind. If that's running the boat, you're going to wind up on the rocks because there's no ability to relate to actual experience. So those are each components. Now the job is to marry those so that we can wind up hearing ao makua, that place in us that's divine, that recognizes things, realizes things. And so the message that I have teaches us how to do that. How do we get the captain running the boat? And what are the problems that we encounter in this attempt to reach the captain?
Right.
And in our way, we say life is a game called Let's Wake Up. We come here to play. And that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And that's why the pain. The
Oh,
pain, the reason there's going to be such pain is pain wakes us up and it delivers the gift of humility. Humility is the ability to look at life from different perspectives, the ability not to need to be right about something, instead to just be able to listen and look, and something magical happens. You can always see when one perspective is higher than the other. You don't have to guess. And so if you just let it into your brain and look at the world from those shoes, you discover things, and you don't have to believe. The belief is irrelevant. And that's what we're doing, and as EagleVision. The Hawaiians would call it Ike Papalua, the high sight that brings power. The Native Americans call it EagleVision, same thing.
beautiful. Well, Sean is on, and he put a link in here to something in Facebook, so I can't see what it is, but I mean, it's really early in Hawaii. Good morning, Sean. And thank you. So how would you like to leave this? You're optimistic, right? You think that the prophecy's fulfilled and there's a chance to turn the ship, and there's we can use the internet and our consciousness, this consciousness rising, to liberate and create a mystical relationship back to who we really are. And I think that's why we embodied it this time. I think we chose, I think that's why there's so many people on earth, is that there's a whole bunch of us that said, hey, I want to play this game. This looks like fun. We just didn't know how hard it would be.
Well, you're absolutely correct, Kathy. And there is that, matter of fact, what you just said is the only way forward if we're going to survive absolute enslavement and tyranny, because that is what's coming our way. And anybody that's half awake can look out there and see what's going on and realize that that's true. We're in trouble. And this Eagle's Nest family that I'm trying to build is so that everybody out there that is the kind of the light worker that you're talking about can have a home, can have a way to connect with the circle of life. The big thing that we need to avoid at this point is the Lone Ranger syndrome, with everybody out there doing their own thing. Because when we do that, we don't have the strength.
Right,
But
right.
when we all come together in the same place for the same reason, and all take our place in the circle of life. That's why I say it's our family. It's not meant to be my family.
Right,
It's
right.
meant to be our family.
Yes, yeah, and that's a new role of leadership. As again, we've been in the dark ages, and I see us going into a renaissance. And the renaissance is where more light is coming in the earth, more people are co-creating at their highest level, and there's a lot of joy and co-creation. A lot of this, Jesus said, you know, when two or more are gathered, he wasn't talking about that in a parable. That was real. That was a real suggestion that we need to commune, and that our electrical bodies alone will be more powerful that way. So okay, so Lono, I put in the chat, I put the HunaWisdom, I put in your eaglesnestfamily.com. Is there anything else that better ways for people to connect with you? So that I did put those 2 sites in, but is there any other way people should connect with you so that they can continue?
Probably the best way is through the website at www.HunaWisdom.com, and just go there and you can contact me through there. We do workshops. I do a lot of counseling. I do a lot of work with businesses. I'm very aware as an economist of what's happening right now. So I do give a lot of advice to people who run businesses. I think most people who are in business must realize that we're getting ready to be hit with a tidal wave of inflation. I have a whole presentation that I'm getting ready to post on the website. If any of your people out there have ever been confused about economics and wind up getting confused about the government lies to you, okay? That's what the government does. They lie. And their lies are designed to create confusion. And what I do is I sort things out and I help you to see in very clear ways how 1 + 1 = 2, not 3, not 5, 1 + 1 = 2. And when you look at life that way and you get the principles, I don't care about politics. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm into principles. And I teach principles. And these principles are inviolable. They're universal truth. They were true 1,000 years ago, and they'll be true 1,000 years today. We need to understand the principles, and that's what I teach.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I know we're going to want to do this more than once, but thank you so much for today. And I do hope that all of you that have been here, thank you so much. If you have a chance, please share this conversation so more and more people can hear it, and more and more people can go to the website and start their rediscovery and remembering of who they really are. Thank you so much.
Can I say thank you to you?
Oh,
I
sure.
really appreciate the fact of what you do and what Sean does. Without people like you, we have no voice.
Right.
So, you know, we're all a critical part,
right,
an important part of this circle. And I just want to say mahalo. Thank you very much, Kathy, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, this is my job is to help as many people wake up to their divinity as possible. That is my life mission. So you help me help them. So it's all perfect. It's a circle. Thank you, dear. Thank you. We'll talk again soon. I can't wait to meet you in person.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
aloha. You're not that far away.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.